My name is Lavonda Turner. I'm 41 years old, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. This is the story of how I gave up everything for love, and how one stolen glance at a bank statement led me to take it all back. It was a Sunday morning in early September when it all started. I was standing in my kitchen, sunlight leaking in through the sheer curtains and dancing across the marble countertops like everything was still okay. My son, Ryan, had just asked for pancakes, and I was scrolling through recipes on my laptop, something comforting, something simple. Then it happened. A soft ping from the corner of the screen. A new notification from the bank. I almost didn't open it. I usually didn't. Ethan, my husband of 16 years, always handled the finances. "Don't worry about that, baby. I've got it covered," he'd say with that effortless charm I fell for all those years ago. I used to believe him. But something about that notification, it felt intrusive, almost guilty. Like the screen itself wanted to confess. $2,900. Cartier. $1,700. Burberry. Dinner for two at Alora's Garden. I stared at the charges, each one pressing down on my chest like bricks. Alora's Garden? On my birthday? He said he was in Dallas for a conference that weekend. He even called the kids and me right on time while we sat at the kitchen table with a store-bought cake. I even smiled when he said, "Next year, I'll make it up to you." Now I knew. He was in Dallas, all right. But not at any conference. "What are you looking at?" Ethan's voice rang out behind me. I snapped the laptop shut like it burned. He was walking into the kitchen like nothing was wrong, a sleepy grin on his face. "Morning, babe." "Just a few online orders," I said, matching his calm tone like I hadn't just seen the man I trusted with my entire life was living a double one. That moment right there? That was the first time I heard my heartbeat like a war drum. Like my body already knew this wasn't just a mistake. This was a betrayal that ran deep, so deep it might cost me more than I could admit. I'm not sure how I got through that day. I made the pancakes, packed the kids' lunches, even laughed at Ryan's silly jokes at dinner. I must have looked like a woman in control. But inside, something had cracked. And once a woman sees the first fracture, she can't unsee it. She either falls through it, or she steps up and finds a way to seal it shut. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I waited. I didn't even know what for, maybe a confession. A sign. Ethan lay next to me in bed, scrolling through his phone like always, completely unaware his wife was about to become someone he wouldn't recognize. At 1:47 a.m., I slipped out of bed, walked over to his nightstand, and picked up the one thing he kept closer than me these days, his phone. Password protected. Of course. But he wasn't clever. 6 digits. Ryan's birthday. Easy. Click. The screen lit up. A message blinked at the top. "Good night, M. Miss your arms around me last night." I tapped. A thread opened up in front of me like a bomb. Her name? Chloe. Her face? Young. Body like a Malibu yoga ad. In one photo, she was lying in a hotel bed, making a kissy face, captioned, "Wish you were here again, E." He responded, "Me too, baby. Soon." My breath caught in my throat. There were receipts. Selfies. Heart emojis. Even a voice message where he whispered, "I can't wait to be with you full time." That's when my body gave up. I slid to the bathroom floor and stared at my reflection. Hair messy, eyes swollen, cheeks hollow. I was looking at a woman who had given up a career, her dreams, her independence, to become the quiet support system behind a man who built his empire on lies. And now, he had stolen something more sacred than money. He gave her money, under our son's name. I began forwarding every message, every image, and every transaction to a secret email account I created that night. Then I wiped his phone clean of evidence I'd touched anything. I was shaking, but I was awake now. And I wasn't going back to sleep. The next morning, Ethan left early for what he claimed was a meeting in Knoxville. Same charcoal gray suit, same worn leather briefcase, same meaningless kiss on the cheek. "Don't wait up," he said casually, sipping the coffee I'd brewed with hands that hadn't stopped trembling since 2 a.m. I nodded, like I always did. But that morning, something inside me had shifted. The woman he'd walked out on wasn't the same one he kissed goodbye. By noon, I had already made the first call. Amanda Ramirez, my college roommate and now a corporate security consultant for a Fortune 100 firm. She was the first person I'd called that wasn't a therapist or a lawyer. She had been through a nasty divorce 2 years earlier and understood what it meant to feel humiliated but trapped. When I told her everything, she didn't gasp. She just asked one question. "How soon do you want the truth?" "As fast as possible," I whispered. "And Amanda? I don't want him to know I'm looking." "Say no more," she replied. "I know a guy." That guy was Russell. Private investigator, quiet as fog, clean background, no drama. We met in a discreet cafe tucked behind a gas station in Brentwood. He wore jeans, a button-down, and had a thick file already ready with a pen clipped to the edge. I slid Ethan's daily schedule across the table, along with the screenshots of texts I had taken. Russell took one look and nodded. "Give me 2 weeks. You'll have everything." And he delivered. 10 days later, I was parked in my SUV outside Ryan's soccer practice when the email came through. Subject line, Black Swan, full report. I clicked. The first picture nearly made me vomit. Ethan, standing outside a high-rise condo in Midtown, grinning like a man with no shame, holding the hand of the same woman who haunted my inbox. Chloe. Yoga pants, perfect hair, smug expression. He even held her bag for her like a gentleman. What a performance. There were receipts. Thousands of dollars in spending. Spa retreats. First-class tickets. Jewelry. Then came the lease agreement. A luxury condo Ethan was paying $4,900 a month for, in his name. Russell had managed to pull bank statements from a secondary credit card. One Ethan never told me existed. I did the math. In just 5 months, he had spent over $118,000 on her. And the worst part? The largest transactions were tied to a Shell Trust account. One he had quietly opened under our son's name. A paper trail that would make Ryan look like a trust fund kid for a mistress he didn't even know existed. I clutched the steering wheel and blinked away the tears. Ryan ran up to the car moments later, grinning and sweaty, asking if we could get ice cream. I smiled back like I wasn't slowly watching my life unravel behind my eyes. That night, I filed everything in a hard drive and locked it in the bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet, the one only I used. Then I turned my attention to my next step. I needed legal backup. I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Lawrence Green, our longtime family attorney. Officially, I said I needed to update our estate documents. But the real reason was darker. Over mint tea, I asked, what happens if a husband uses joint assets to fund an affair in Tennessee? He looked up from his paperwork slowly. Are we still speaking hypothetically? I stared into his eyes and said nothing. Tennessee is equitable distribution, he began. It doesn't mean a 50-50th split. But if there's proof of misuse of marital funds for an affair, that's called dissipation of assets. The court can weigh that. I nodded. And what if the funds were filtered through a trust under a child's name? His brow furrowed, but he didn't speak. Instead, I opened my email and showed him a few of the documents. A lease. A bank transfer. A screenshot of Chloe's Instagram captioned "Weekend with E." Our little escape. Lawrence sat back in his chair and exhaled. Lavonda, you've got enough to bury him. I don't want to bury him, I said, my voice steady. Not yet. I want to expose him. When I left that meeting, I didn't go home. I went to the cafe across from Chloe's yoga studio and sat by the window until she finished her last class. Then I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was young. Too young. I don't know who you are, she snapped quickly, but I'm not getting into drama. I'm Ethan's wife, I said calmly. And if you don't want to be named in a lawsuit for receiving over $100,000 in marital assets, I suggest we meet. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Across from your studio. Don't be late. I hung up before she could respond. The next morning, Chloe walked in wearing a hoodie, oversized sunglasses, and a pair of designer sneakers Ethan had probably bought her. She looked like a nervous child caught cheating on a test. I didn't know he was married, she whispered, looking down. You knew, I said softly. You just didn't care. I pushed a manila folder across the table. Inside were the receipts. The bank statements. The lease. The transfers. The vacation photos. She paled. What do you want? She asked. Nothing, I said. I just wanted to look you in the eye and let you know he's not your future. He's everyone's past. She looked ready to cry. I didn't stay to comfort her. I stood, left my coffee unfinished, and walked out. But the anger didn't stop there. Something in me wouldn't rest. There had to be more. This couldn't be Ethan's first affair. And I was right. That night, I dug through an old folder in the garage, my past life folder, from when I was still working in PR. Inside, I found a name I hadn't seen in years. Rebecca Myers. She had worked as a receptionist at Ethan's firm years ago. There were rumors back then, but I had never wanted to believe it. Now, I needed to know. I found her on Facebook. Still in Tennessee. Living quietly in Clarksville. I sent a message. Hi Rebecca. I'm Lavonda Turner. Ethan's wife. I think we've both been hurt by the same man. If you're willing to talk. I'm ready to listen. She replied 15 minutes later. I've been waiting for this message for years. Rebecca was already seated when I arrived at the small cafe in Clarksville. She wore a white blouse tucked into dark jeans and had her hair pulled back in a way that made her look both mature and guarded. As I walked toward the table, I could see something in her eyes, recognition, maybe. Or just the quiet understanding of someone who's been through the same storm. Lavonda, she said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was strong. Honest. Thank you for reaching out. I sat down across from her and folded my hands, unsure where to begin. But I didn't have to say much. Rebecca had been holding her story in for years, and once the lid came off, the truth spilled out in waves. He told me he was separated, she said, voice low but steady. Said you had grown cold, that you'd moved on emotionally, and he was just waiting to finalize the papers for the kids' sake. I didn't flinch. I'd heard that exact lie before, from Chloe. Word for word. Rebecca continued. We dated for 6 months. He told me he'd already signed papers for a new house in Chattanooga. Even took me to look at rings. One day, he just vanished. She pulled out her phone and showed me an old photo, Ethan, smiling on a beach with his arm wrapped around her waist, her head resting on his chest. The caption read, "Won't make you wait much longer. We deserve a new beginning." I kept my face calm, even as I felt my stomach turn. When I found out he was still married to you, Rebecca said, still posting family vacation pictures online like nothing had changed, I realized I'd been nothing more than a placeholder. Like I was filling time between his lies. I nodded slowly. You're not alone. She met my eyes and said the words I hadn't expected to hear, I'll testify. Whatever you need. Not out of spite, but because you and your kids deserve the truth. I reached across the table and gripped her hand. In that moment, it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like recovery. It felt like closure, for both of us. When I got home, I kissed the kids goodnight, tucked Sophie in tight, and watched Ryan as he fell asleep to the soft glow of his nightlight. Then I went downstairs and opened my laptop. I began moving money. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here and there from our joint account, hidden in line items like back-to-school shopping, tutoring fees, car maintenance. It took 6 weeks, but I siphoned nearly $32,000 into 2 separate accounts, one in my name, and one trust under the children's names, locked under a revocable living trust. I didn't stop there. I knew Ethan's weak spot wasn't just women. It was money. Ego. Power. And if I wanted to bring him down completely, I needed to find out where he was hiding the rest. That's when I remembered Elaine. Elaine Cartwright, Ethan's executive assistant at Brindle & Company for almost a decade. She was sharp, loyal, discreet, and completely overlooked by every man in that building, especially Ethan. He used to call her the human fax machine when he was irritated. But I remembered her differently. She once emailed me after a family Christmas party and said, "You're the only real thing in that man's life. Don't let him forget it." I called her on a quiet Friday afternoon and invited her to coffee. We met at a small cafe in Franklin, miles away from the city and prying eyes. She arrived early, waiting with a folder in her lap and a calm expression on her face. "I figured it was only a matter of time," she said, sliding the folder toward me. Inside were email printouts, financial documents, and internal memos, all pointing to one thing. Ethan had been funneling money through a shadow investment fund set up in the Caymans. The name of the fund? Northlight Holdings. Did he open this under his own name? I asked. Elaine shook her head. He used your son's. My throat went dry. Ryan? Yes, she said softly. He listed Ryan as the beneficiary, so it would pass a surface audit. But it won't survive a deep dive. It's dirty, Lavonda. And I've been watching him build this thing for almost 2 years. She handed me a flash drive wrapped in a small piece of leather. Everything's in there: emails, transfers, photos. Even some from his so-called conferences. You'll want to see them. I gripped the drive tightly. Why are you helping me? She looked at me for a long time. Because you're not the first woman he's broken. And because I remember when you used to be fearless. Before he started chipping away at you. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I stood, leaned forward, and kissed her cheek. You just became the most important part of my plan. She smiled. Good. Because there's more. She reached into her purse and pulled out another folder, this one with Ethan's personal travel records. Trips to Cabo, Aspen, Jackson Hole. None of which were reported to his company. But every single one was booked with the company credit card, and every single one had receipts. 2 guests. Every time. I left the cafe with a flash drive that could destroy Ethan's entire reputation and a paper trail long enough to make a judge's jaw drop. When I got home, Ethan was watching football in the living room. Where were you? He asked, not even looking away from the screen. I took off my coat, hung it on the hook like I had nothing to hide, and said, just catching up with an old friend. He grunted. Cool. He had no idea. That weekend, I sat down at my desk with the USB and spent 8 hours cataloging everything into labeled folders. By Monday, I had organized a war chest, digital and physical copies stored in 3 places, including a hidden account at my attorney's office. Then I did the unthinkable. I called his mother. Lorraine Turner had always been polite to me. Cold, distant, but never cruel. She was an old money woman, someone who believed in appearances more than truths. But I needed her to be at that dinner. I needed everyone there. Lorraine, I said sweetly, next Thursday is our 16th anniversary. Ethan's been so swamped lately, I want to plan a surprise dinner. Private room at Maison Bronte. Just you, Cass, maybe Aunt Helen and Uncle Thomas? Family only. Her voice lit up. Oh my goodness, he finally agreed to take the night off? I'll wear that lavender dress from your wedding. I smiled. Perfect. I already knew the room I was booking. It was the exact same private suite Ethan had reserved 3 months earlier, with Chloe. I had the receipt. I even knew what wine they drank. Now, it was my turn. The days leading up to our anniversary dinner felt like standing on a cliff with a storm rising behind me, every breath measured, every step carefully placed. But this time, I wasn't scared. I had spent years walking on eggshells to keep our life from cracking. And now, I was the one holding the hammer. I planned every detail of the evening with surgical precision. The reservation was set at Maison Bronte, the exact private room Ethan had once booked for his secret dinner with Chloe. I knew because I had the receipt from his email. I even ordered the same dishes, the salt-crusted lamb, the seared sea bass, and the overpriced $200 bottle of Cabernet. But this time, the table would be surrounded by people who actually mattered, people who still believed Ethan was someone worth respecting. I hand-delivered small envelopes to each guest myself: Lorraine, Ethan's mother; Cassandra, his sister; Aunt Helen and Uncle Thomas, 2 of the most revered names in his extended family. I told them it was a surprise for Ethan. That I wanted it to feel classic, warm, and intimate. They all said yes immediately. Why wouldn't they? To them, we were still the golden couple. The image Ethan had spent years curating was still intact. To them, I was still the supportive wife, and he the ambitious, loving husband. No one knew that illusion was about to crumble like stale bread. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully, slowly, deliberately. I wore a crimson off-shoulder gown I hadn't pulled out in years. Not since my old days in media, when I used to command rooms with nothing more than a glance and a perfectly timed pause. Around my neck, I clipped a diamond necklace that shimmered against my collarbone, one Ethan had bought for Chloe. It had arrived in an anonymous package 3 weeks prior, with a sticky note on top: "I don't want these. I'm sure you'll know when to use them." That time was now. As I stepped out of the dressing room, Ethan was fumbling with his tie in the mirror. He turned and froze for a moment when he saw me. Whoa. You look different. Do I? I smiled softly. It's a special night. He hesitated. Oh, I thought I had dinner with my boss tonight. I cut in gently but firmly. I've already invited your mother. Cassandra. Uncle Thomas. Everyone. It's paid for and reserved. Private room. You wouldn't want to disappoint them. He blinked. Caught. Right, yeah. Of course. We drove in silence. He didn't hold my hand. I didn't offer it. At the restaurant, we were greeted warmly and escorted upstairs to the candlelit private room where everyone was already seated. Lorraine gave me a warm hug and whispered, "You two still have that magic, you know." I smiled and kissed her cheek. If only she knew. Dinner began smoothly. Laughter filled the room, glasses clinked, and Ethan played his role perfectly, smiling, gracious, the attentive husband and doting son. He even poured my wine like a gentleman. But I could feel the tension humming under my skin. Because I knew what was coming with dessert. When the server brought out the final course, a layered chocolate soufflé drizzled in raspberry, I reached into my purse and pulled out a small black box. I placed it gently in front of Ethan. "Happy 16th anniversary," I said. He opened it with a puzzled expression. Inside was the secondary credit card he had secretly opened for Chloe, snapped clean in half. He blinked at it. "What's this?" I smiled. "A reminder. Of what you thought you could hide." Lorraine looked confused. "Is this a joke?" I turned to the server and nodded. He brought out a sleek black folder and began handing out packets I had carefully prepared, one to each person at the table. Inside were photographs, credit card statements, emails from Ethan's secret legal consultation, photos of him with Chloe at resorts, the lease on the condo, and even a transcript of the financial transfers made under Ryan's name. I didn't want to say anything until now, I began, voice calm and poised, but for the past 6 months, I've been investigating the man I thought I married. What you're holding is evidence of everything he's done, behind my back, behind your backs, and at the expense of our children's future. There was silence. Lorraine stared at a photo of Ethan in a hot tub with Chloe, taken in Santa Fe. Her hands trembled. Cassandra covered her mouth in shock. Uncle Thomas whispered, "Lord have mercy." Ethan stood abruptly, his chair screeching. "Lavonda, what the hell are you doing?" I looked him in the eyes. "You can sit and listen. Or you can get up and run like you always do. But this? This is happening, with or without your permission." He clenched his jaw, lips parted as if 1,000 lies were lining up behind his teeth, but no words came out. I continued. "I've already moved half our assets into a personal account, entirely within my legal rights. Divorce papers will be delivered to your office tomorrow morning at exactly 9 a.m. And this necklace?" I gestured to the diamonds at my neck. "You bought it for your mistress. She sent it to me. Thought I'd like it better." Lorraine gasped. Ethan tried to speak again. I didn't let him. "I'm not doing this to destroy you, Ethan. I'm doing this to end what you've been slowly killing for years, our marriage, our home, your children's trust. And I will not be the one left in ruins." He sat back down like the air had been knocked out of him. The room was dead silent. Lorraine slowly closed her packet. Her voice cracked. "I raised a son. But I don't know the man sitting in front of me." Cassandra's eyes were glassy. "You told me you were under pressure. That Lavonda didn't understand you. You said you were trying." "Trying? You were funding a mistress with Ryan's name on the bank form?" I said nothing more. I didn't need to. Ethan left before dessert was finished. Didn't say a word. Just stood up and walked out of the room like a man who had been publicly stripped of every shred of dignity. I stayed behind. I held Lorraine's hand. I kissed Cassandra's forehead. And then I raised my glass. "To truth," I said softly. No one argued. The next morning, at exactly 9:01 a.m., divorce papers landed on Ethan's desk. And from that moment on, his life began to crumble piece by piece. The silence after the storm is always the most revealing. Ethan didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't show up at the house for 3 straight days after that dinner. And when he finally did, it wasn't to talk. It was to pack a bag and take some of his suits, some files, and a framed photo of the kids from the mantel. I didn't stop him. I just watched him move like a ghost through a house he no longer belonged to. The divorce process unfolded faster than I expected. Once my attorney submitted everything, the financial records, Chloe's recorded admission, the Cayman Islands shell fund under Ryan's name, and Elaine's treasure trove of data, Ethan's legal team went radio silent. They had nothing to fight back with. Mr. Green told me over coffee, he'd be a fool to drag this into court. There's enough here to leave him with barely the shirt on his back. And Ethan wasn't stupid. He was a liar, a cheater, and a narcissist, but he wasn't dumb. He signed the divorce agreement within the week. No arguments. No attempts to plead. He didn't even try to ask for shared custody. He just asked for minimal visitation and moved into a rental apartment downtown. A small, 1-bedroom place with no concierge, no gated entry, and no Tesla parked out front. And still, somehow, it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. Because betrayal doesn't leave you all at once. It lingers like smoke in your clothes. Cassandra sent me a message the day the divorce finalized. 3 words. I'm so sorry. Attached was a longer letter. She had believed her brother when he said he was working on his marriage. She had even encouraged me to give it more time once. But after seeing everything I'd shared, and watching their mother cry herself to sleep from the shame, she realized Ethan hadn't just failed me. He had betrayed all of them. She ended her message with a quiet invitation. Lila wants you to come to her birthday party. She calls you the strongest mom she knows. I hope you'll still come, not as my ex-sister-in-law, but as the woman I admire. I cried quietly at my desk after reading that. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't need apologies. But that line, strongest mom, it stayed with me. I printed it out and taped it to my bathroom mirror. So every morning, when I put on my face, I'd remember the version of myself I was rebuilding. A few weeks later, another package arrived at my door. No return label. No note. Inside were all the things Ethan had ever bought for Chloe, a brand new pair of Chanel heels, a crocodile leather handbag, a Cartier watch. Still wrapped. Still untouched. At the bottom of the box, a single handwritten line. He's yours. Good luck. I folded the note and slipped it into the drawer of my home office. Not as a keepsake, but as proof. That even women who were once fooled could wake up. Could see through the fantasy. I didn't waste time with pity. I had work to do. With part of the divorce settlement, I reached out to Rachel, an old friend from my media days in Atlanta. She was starting a new project, a non-profit platform called At Her North, designed to help women entrepreneurs in the South build their brands, access capital, and share their stories. I need someone who understands branding, Rachel said, and someone who's risen from the wreckage. You're both. I didn't hesitate. Another portion of the settlement went straight into 2 trust funds. One for Ryan. One for Sophie. Each fully protected, with provisions for education, medical costs, and startup ventures. The trusts were managed by Mr. Green himself, with a legal clause barring Ethan from ever accessing or touching a cent. And when I told the kids? Ryan hugged me silently. He was 15 by then. Too old to cry. Too young to fully understand everything, but old enough to know his father had crossed a line. I don't hate him, he said. But I don't want to be like him. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just hugged him back, tighter than I ever had. Sophie was different. She was only 10. But kids her age don't miss much. One evening, she tiptoed into my bedroom holding her little pink memory box, the one she'd been using since kindergarten to hide her most important things. She sat on the edge of my bed and opened it. Inside was a photo of her, Ryan, and Ethan at Disneyland. It used to sit on the living room shelf. She picked it up, stared at it, and then quietly placed it back inside. I don't hate Dad anymore, she said, her voice steady and small. But I still don't want to go out with him alone. I brushed her curls behind her ear. Why not, baby? She looked up at me, eyes dry but heavy. Because Dad doesn't know how to see anyone but himself. But you do. You see us. And you don't let him treat you like you don't matter. I froze. Because there, in that quiet moment with a child too wise for her age, I realized something. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about legacy. What kind of mother would I be if I let their father's behavior teach them what love was supposed to look like? What forgiveness was supposed to mean? What strength was allowed to sound like? I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "You never have to let anyone make you feel invisible. Not ever again." Spring arrived in Nashville like a soft breath after months of holding mine in. I stood in the corner office of a red brick building downtown, the new headquarters of At Her North. Rachel and I had just finalized our launch date. I'd spent the last 2 months building the communications and branding strategy from the ground up. It felt like returning to myself, but not the old self. A newer version. Sharper. Quieter. Unshakable. You know what you look like right now? Rachel asked one afternoon as we stood by the wide windows overlooking the street. I turned, raising a brow. Exhausted? She shook her head. Like the last person to leave the fire, and the only one who took the map. I didn't say anything. But I knew what she meant. There's something that happens to a woman after betrayal. When she survives not just the heartbreak, but the humiliation. When she watches her whole life unravel and still wakes up the next morning with fire in her lungs. That woman? She becomes someone else entirely. Someone unstoppable. The media platform took off faster than either of us expected. We hosted events for single mothers, sponsored grants for young Black women starting small businesses, and launched a storytelling series for survivors of emotional and financial abuse. One of our first digital features, What He Took, What She Rebuilt, was viewed over 300,000 times in the first week. We didn't need Ethan's name to make it go viral. The pain was universal. A few weeks later, Chloe texted me again. I know I have no right. But I still want to say. I'm sorry. I've gone back to college. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. Chloe. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply. Not out of hatred, but because some chapters didn't need to be rewritten. They just needed to be closed. Ethan, meanwhile, faded from the center of everything. The family real estate firm he was set to inherit? His father, Ronald Thompson, retired early and handed it off to his nephew instead. The same man Ethan had called a glorified assistant behind his back for years. Ronald's final words to Ethan, relayed to me by Cassandra, were simple: from now on, we have nothing more to say to each other. Ethan's professional world crumbled quietly. Whispers began to spread in Nashville's investor circles. Something about mismanaged funds. Maybe even misconduct. Elaine, bless her, didn't leak anything. But in high-level finance, reputations rot faster than fruit once the stench begins. At home, Ethan remained a ghost. He showed up for the court-mandated visitations every other weekend, usually with takeout from the kids' favorite restaurants and gifts he hoped would smooth over time and truth. But Ryan never reached out first. He was polite, civil, detached. And Sophie? She refused to go with him alone. She stayed close to me, always asking, "Can I just come next time? Maybe when I feel ready?" I never pushed. Some wounds need time. Some boundaries are lessons we gift our children, lessons we were never taught. One Saturday afternoon in early May, Ethan asked if he could come inside to talk like adults. I let him. He stood awkwardly in the living room he once decorated, staring at the photos still on the wall. He hadn't been inside the house since the divorce. "You look good," he offered weakly. "I am good," I replied, crossing my arms. "What do you want, Ethan?" He hesitated. I didn't expect it all to fall apart so fast. I tilted my head. "You expected me to fall apart instead?" "No, I thought maybe you'd forgive me. Eventually." I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that's warm or joyful. The kind that sounds like a door slamming shut. "You thought I'd stay silent," I said. "That I'd swallow the pain. That I'd do what I've always done, put my feelings aside for your comfort. But you didn't just cheat, Ethan. You didn't just lie. You used our son's name to launder your dirt. You exploited my trust." He opened his mouth, then shut it. I walked to the door and opened it. "We're done. And this isn't your home anymore." He nodded slowly, then turned and walked out. And that was the last time he ever asked for forgiveness. 3 weeks later, I was the keynote speaker at the Women's Entrepreneur Summit in downtown Nashville. I wore a cream-colored jumpsuit, hair pulled back in a clean ponytail, and the diamond studs Ethan once gave Chloe now glinting from my ears. What once symbolized betrayal now stood as a mark of reclamation. A reporter asked me after the panel, "You were once a well-known creative director in Atlanta. Now you've launched a non-profit, become a public speaker, and started again from scratch. How does it feel to return?" I smiled at her. "I'm not returning," I said. "I'm moving forward. But this time, I'm headed in the right direction. Because this story was never about the affair. Not really. It was about remembering who I was before I forgot myself in someone else's vision. It was about refusing to be collateral damage in a man's lie. And it was about showing my children what strength looks like, not when everything is perfect, but when everything has shattered. There's a strange kind of peace that settles in once the ashes cool. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind you earn when you've faced the fire and walked out carrying only the pieces worth saving. In the months that followed the divorce, I didn't just rebuild, I reimagined everything. My life, my purpose, my legacy. At Her North became more than a project. It became a movement. Women from all across the South wrote to us. Survivors of betrayal, mothers looking for a second chance, professionals starting over after walking away from toxic marriages, jobs, families. I saw myself in every one of them. One letter came from a woman in Georgia. She wrote, "My husband forged my signature to cash out my 401k. I didn't even know until the IRS called. I thought I'd never come back from that. Then I watched your speech. And something changed in me. I started again. Because if you can walk through what you walked through and still stand tall, maybe I can too." That's when I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a spark. A permission slip for women who'd been told too many times to stay quiet, stay small, stay married for the kids. It was a declaration. A few months later, on a quiet Saturday, Sophie came into my room. She was holding her memory box again, the pink one with stickers peeling off the sides. "I added something," she said, shyly. I sat up. "Can I see?" She opened it. Inside were the old family photos she kept, the one from Disneyland, a drawing of her and Ryan holding my hands, and a new picture. It was one I didn't even realize she had taken. It was from my summit speech in Nashville. I was on stage, mid-sentence, hands lifted, fire in my eyes. Someone had captured me in my element. Alive. Strong. Whole. "I don't need to pretend everything's okay anymore," Sophie said softly. "I just want to keep remembering how we got through it." I pulled her into my arms. We sat like that for a long time. Later that evening, I got a letter from the local courthouse. Ethan had filed a motion to reduce his child support payments. His income had dropped significantly. The judge had denied it. I didn't gloat. Instead, I signed a response with 3 simple words: stay the course. Ethan still showed up every other weekend. On time. Polished. Carrying gifts like peace offerings. But he never asked to come inside again. The kids went to lunch with him, but their eyes told me everything when they returned. They weren't bitter, but they were distant. Older. Changed. And he could feel it, too. He once texted me late on a Sunday night after dropping them off. "I don't know how to fix it." I didn't respond. Because some things aren't meant to be fixed. Some bridges aren't supposed to be rebuilt. They were faulty from the beginning. They weren't built on truth. That summer, I took the kids on a road trip across the South. No grand plans, just stops at local diners, bookstores, lakesides, and forgotten landmarks. Every night we stayed in small inns or Airbnbs. I left my laptop off. My phone on silent. One night in Asheville, Ryan and I sat on a porch swing overlooking a slow-moving creek. He looked older than 15 in the moonlight, quieter, steadier. He turned to me and said, "You know, I used to wish you stayed with Dad. So things wouldn't change." I didn't interrupt. But now. I'm glad you didn't, he said. You showed us what standing up looks like. That you don't have to be loud to be strong. I didn't cry until later. Alone. In the bathroom. Not because of the pain. But because that's all I ever wanted, to break the cycle. To show my children that being kind doesn't mean being weak. That being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing your soul. That being a wife doesn't mean swallowing betrayal to keep the peace. When we returned to Nashville, I stepped back into the world I had created, not the one Ethan built, but the one I reclaimed. And with every client we helped, every woman we lifted, every lie we replaced with truth, I became more than a survivor. I became a builder. A creator. A woman no longer living in someone else's shadow. And if you ask me now, was it worth it? The silence? The loneliness? The rage? Yes. Because in the end, I chose myself. And I taught my children how to do the same. Lavonda's story is more than a tale of betrayal, it's a testament to what happens when a woman stops waiting for rescue and rescues herself. She didn't just expose a liar. She exposed a legacy of silence. And she changed the course of her family's future in the process. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge is becoming everything they said you'd never be. If you found strength in Lavonda's story, share it with someone who needs it. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Should she have forgiven Ethan? Or was she right to walk away with her dignity? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where every story reminds you, the truth always finds its voice.